All right. Well, this is John Craig,
And this is Sandy.
and this is Walking in
There you
Spirit and
go.
Truth.
I wondered if you were going to say that part.
I was going to say that. So we just want to welcome you here to LambTube
LambTube. That's
Live.
right. Live.
And it's really good, so you get to see our smiling faces.
Exactly. Are you glad we're smiling?
We're smiling.
Yeah.
So we are glad to be with you this evening, and we want you to join us with the chat room here on YouTube Live, and you can join and be part of the conversation. We would love to hear from you.
Yeah.
And I see a cat in our background.
Yeah, we do have a cat in our background. It's just going to have to be that way today.
So anyway, well, we've got some things we want to talk about today. Some really good things we're going to be sharing, and some things that we're going to be studying out today.
Yeah, but we're also going to be talking about what's going on in the world right now, because there's a lot happening and significant events happening right now.
Very significant events. So especially during what's happened in the last few days, I think it all started on the 11th, and it's just escalating. And what are we talking about? Well, it's what's happening in Israel right now. And so if you haven't been paying attention, I want to give you some updates and some points of view that I've been gathering from various news reports. But one of the things is that the mainstream media is not picking up on this. Fox News barely picked up on this conflict that's boiling right now.
Sad, isn't it?
Yeah, that's boiling right now along the border between Gaza and Israel. So what are we talking about? Well, it all started when there was a military incursion. A small military group dressed up as Muslim women entered that were from the IDF. Israeli Defense Forces went into Gaza in order to kidnap a military commander belonging to the Hamas government. And the operation went south very quickly. They ended up killing the commander, and a firefight ensued, which ended up in escalating into the recent rocket attacks that are going on in Israel. So with that being said, why is this going on? Well, if you want to go back and remember something that popped up in the news a couple weeks ago, and which was fulfilled on November the 8th. And what was that? Well, there was a complaint that the Hamas government officials had not been paid for several months because money had been cut off to Hamas in Gaza. And so Qatar said, hey, we are going to pay the salaries, and we're going to send that money in. So on November the 8th, $15 million was sent in from Qatar in cash, in suitcases, to the into Gaza. Well, apparently what's happened from there is that it wasn't actually going to be used for salaries. It was actually going to be used to pay for these rockets that are going on and are being sent off and launched into Israel. Well, part of it is because the planned incursion was a sacrifice of these soldiers, knowing that one or several could die in the attack because they were going to be set up. So what are you talking about?
Well, this is
the intel, is that this group of soldiers that were going to kidnap this military commander were actually being set up, because when they got there, they were going to be told what was going on, or at least the enemy. The Gaza was going to find out the enemy, but the Hamas soldiers would be told what was going on, and they were going to catch them in the act. And that's why the firefight ensued. That's why the commander was killed. That's why one of the IDF soldiers, commanders, was killed. And that, of course, brought about the big escalation, the big firefight. So Hamas started attacking Israel. Israel said, hey, we're not going to let you attack us. And so they started attacking back. The Israeli Defense Force, Air Force, began to bomb, and all reserve soldiers were called to active duty. And there is a great accumulation of tanks on the Gaza border right now. And we don't know what's going to happen, but it looks like there might be a movement of Israel into Gaza. So why are they doing that? Because it's a setup. Everybody's working together.
Who's setting whom up?
So remember, Who was paid? Hamas was paid. By whom? Qatar. Qatar paid them in what? US dollars. Why not the Qatar Real, or why not in euros, and why not in another currency? But they paid in US dollars. In other words, US dollars had to come from somewhere. That means somebody is funding Qatar with the money. Always follow the money. Why all this? Because remember what happened 8 years ago? The whole plan was to build a gas pipeline from Qatar that would take gas all the way into Europe to sell gas to Europe. And where do they have to go through? They had to go through Syria. So the plan was to take out several Arab countries during the course of 5 years. And one of those countries was to be Syria. Well, it never worked out because Russia came to the aid of Syria and it all stopped. That's where we are today with a planned fight where both Israel and Hamas are almost, let me put it this way, cooperating together to fight against each other, to make it look like a fight in order to bring Russia and Iran into the mix. Because ultimately, the whole plan all along is to take out the Iranian forces in Syria. Syria is guarded and protected by Russia and by the S-300s. And so the point is that Israel, according to Russia, has been sending up reconnaissance planes to figure out where the S-300s are being hidden so that they can attack those locations to take out those defenses so that they can move and have an excuse to go into Syria. Because ultimately, why? Because Qatar wants to build this pipeline. The elite, the globalists, want to have this pipeline to go through Syria because they're going to make multi-billions of dollars off of the pipeline. So what does that mean for us? Well, we could see a huge escalation. That's what we're looking at right now, is a huge escalation
what does that mean?
Into war that is not just a battle of rockets down on the border of Gaza, but a regional war that will bring the United States pitted against Russia there in the Middle East. And that's what we're looking at. That's what it looks like as a setup to be. We don't know what the response is for President Trump at this point in time of how he's going to handle it. We do know that this is a very, very delicate situation. And if this is truly a setup, if this is truly a setup in order to bring this war to take place, it's to topple the Assad regime so that they can build this pipeline through Syria. So another part that they're actually looking at is Hezbollah going to join in and start sending in rockets from the north? And why does Israel want to keep stirring this up? Because they have been promised the oil that's in the Golan, and which would bring in also billions and trillions of dollars of oil money into Israel. That's all part of that's still part of Syria. They want even more, and because they want the oil fields that are underneath that. And so they've been promised that they can have part of that if they will do their part in stirring up this regional war.
Israel has been told that.
That's according to this one source that I'm reading.
Is that one source pro-Israel?
Yes, actually is. So the thing is that we have to look at all different sides, and we know that ultimately what's happening is you follow the money. And when you follow the money, that's what's been happening in the Middle East for the last several years, last 8 years, is because the globalist elitists want Syria. They want to send, and they want to use our American troops and our American soldiers to actually go in and they'll give our American soldiers and put their lives on the line for this gas pipeline.
But is it all that? Because it haven't the powers that be wanted us to be in a world war right now, period?
Well, they certainly do. I mean, and if you look at it that way, you can look at some of the things that happened in Europe, where Macron from France said they need to have a European army, and that will be strong enough that they can fight against the threats of Russia, China, and the United States. Well,
And the United
the
States?
United States is a NATO ally. Why are they saying that? Well, it's because they want a European Union and their own army, because they feel like the United States is now a threat to to Europe.
How so?
Because President Trump is a very good businessman, and he is making deals. But the thing is when he makes a deal, everybody benefits. And it's a good thing for everybody, but that's not how they see it. They feel like they're encroaching on their pie, not understanding that the pie can continue to grow. But that's how socialists and communists think. The pie is only so big, so you have to preserve your piece of the pie. And whereas where in the business world, the pie can continue to grow and everybody can get a bigger slice. So that's kind of the point of view that Trump is coming from.
So why is there a media blackout on Israel, or is there still a media blackout on what's happening over there right now?
Well, as far as I know, at this point in time, as of Tuesday evening, I've not seen anything coming through on the mainstream media about this. And this is probably
the truth of that,
the truth of this. And let alone, this is one of the things that the media jumps on the side of the Palestinians right away. And they're very, very quick to always accuse Israel. But understand that this ordeal is much bigger than what we really think. It's just that Israel and Hamas and the Palestinians are being used as pawns, and those that are in their leadership, they're the ones that are getting paid off. It's not that it's the people that are thrown in the harm's way. That's the way it always is. That's the way. That's what's happening. That's why our soldiers get thrown into harm's way. That's why the Palestinian civilians and the Israeli civilians are being thrown in harm's way. And then the one other thing is that they want Israel, the Israeli people, to rise up with anger so that they be unified in going after Iran, because Israel is not unified in going after Iran, because they don't think and they don't see that Iran is really that much of a threat. It's more of the fight or the rhetoric of the leadership, not of the regular people.
Okay. So you're saying all that, and if all this, I know that we've heard people say that things are about to blow up all over the world. Now, we also know that in the past, things happen in the United States to keep the United States people distracted from what is really news. Well, and this is really news, by the way, or they cause things to happen. Are there any news events right now that would keep us distracted, like the fires? Joe brought up the fires.
Absolutely.
Like
those fires in California, they happen so quickly and so spontaneously that
and they're devastating.
And they're devastating. Now, what's happened is there's Southern California and Northern California just exploded in fires. Well, why? Well, one, it's very dry. Two, because of the geoengineering and the chemical fallout, it makes the very dry, brittle, uncleared out forest, because the forest management has been poor, has made it very, very much a tinder box. Plus, with the Santa Ana winds coming up from the desert to really increase the intensity of the fires. But what they have found out is very interesting. Moments before the fires literally exploded, the power company in the Southern California and the power company in the Northern California both reported that they had power outages that only come because of an intense surge upon their system. So the surge hit their system that caused their system to go out, and then within minutes, these fires started. It was not because of down power lines or anything like that. It was that there was some type of power surge that seemed to be the cause in the igniting of these forest fires, because they became so hot and so intense, and they grew so rapidly that it seems to be stimulated by an external force. That is really the concern. So that sounds like conspiracy. Well, when you look at when you get so many coincidences happening all at the same time in the same order and the same pattern, then then you start looking at that as there's more than just a coincidence, it is actually seemed to be more of a planned action. And then if you look at the intensities of the fires, someone was going over how many fires over the last 15 years. Well, there's been an intensification, an increase of fires significantly over the last several years in California. So that's one thing. It is a diversion, it's a diversion of attention. But what else is going on? We have another diversion of attention. What is that? It's these voter fraud issues.
That's what Tova's saying, but she said that here, let me read it. Well, I don't know that I can read it. It's too small. Do you want to read it? I can't get it bigger.
It won't go bigger.
No.
Okay. All right.
Anyway, why don't you get it on yours? So anyway, well, she's saying that she did talk about the election debacles. She said it isn't even the fires because they're not truthfully covering that. It's the election debacles and the mobs. Have y'all seen the? Can you see that?
Yeah, it says haven't y'all seen the weather blowing up in Asia and the Middle East? So yeah, so we've got that, and then.
But she said more.
Okay.
All right.
And it says in the fire across the Santa Susana, which is the 1940s nuclear waste dump, which is really, that's pretty serious. Throwing up any type of nuclear waste that's still in the soil. So there's some things there. So yeah, there's some very intense things. And then of course there's the migrant caravan that's coming up out of the south, which seems to be dissipating in one sense, but that is a distraction. And we've got a lot of different elements, and the real news and the real things that are happening on the day are being covered up. And right. I think one of the things is that that's being covered up, and it's really not even being talked about much, is really even the voter fraud. That's not even being addressed properly. And that's very serious to us, because the very sense that someone would take away our votes by stuffing the ballot box is un-American, at least, and it is illegal.
Those people are not for America,
and it's treasonous in the most serious nature of it.
I'm sorry, there's a party out there that's not for America. It's for socialism. It's not for the republic. This is a republic. It's not a democracy, and they want this republic destroyed, and to go the route of socialism, to go the route of communism, and to join this one world order. True.
Yes, it is true.
You're not saying anything on that?
Well, I mean, that is ultimately what they want to do. They want control. They want to stop President Trump from having any control in the Senate, because in the control of the Senate means the passing and putting into judges into place for the next 20 to 40 years of controlling the Supreme Court, and as well as other federal judgeships. So,
didn't you say, though, that some of the top people in the party are about to be taken out for the treasonous crimes?
That is what some sources are saying, and that some are actually saying that President Trump is using that as leverage in order to make sure he has control, to control them through. Otherwise, he will expose them for their treason and their sedition and their greed, and how they have become rich off the backs of Americans and out of their position, which. Don't you ever wonder how they ever go into Congress and they don't have a penny to their name, but somehow now they're billionaires, like Dianne Feinstein? I mean, she's a billionaire now because of her position in the Senate, and Nancy Pelosi as well, millionaire, made lots of money because of her position. How do you get those insider deals? Do we get that? That is not a republic. That is what happens in a democracy, where the elite control and the rest of us only get the dregs.
Our cats want to be on the program tonight.
Tonight, our cats are gathering.
Well, I know if you're like, oh, I tuned in to hear some teaching, well, we're going to hear that. But I think it's important because there's so little real news out there. And I know we have a news program here too, but we need to be abreast of what's going on. And that means we need to take a minute for some news. So with all that being said, What do we do? What is our position?
Well, honestly, here's my thoughts on it. And because these things that are going on in the world are much bigger than us, honestly. And there's things that are taking place. Why? Because we are living in the day and the hour that God is unfolding a plan. And that plan is it's to ultimately bring about his judgment upon the world and for the redemption of Israel. Because Israel is scattered throughout all the nations of the world. It's to expose the corruption on all levels, and it is to restore the bride and prepare the bride to be able to step into her full role. And I really believe that it that everything that's taken place here in the United States, people have complained, but they've not prayed. People have uh,
That's true.
people have said, "Oh, we hate this prior administration," and some will say, "Well, I hate the Democrats, what they're doing," and there's been people who say, "Well, I hate Trump and what he's doing." I mean, we're such a nation divided right now. But the problem is that we've got to understand that we're living in the day and the hour by which we need to uh, check our hearts to see what's going on. Is our focus on looking for a savior within government, or is our focus on looking to our returning Messiah? And in order for our Messiah to return, is our heart ready?
But at the same point, we need to be praying for those in our government, especially our president. And we can't let up with what's going on right now.
No, we can never give up.
We can't, no let up. This is it.
And the other thing is this, is that, and I remember a vision that Henry Groover had, and it really made a lot of sense to me. And that because when we look at it from our Hebraic roots, and we know that there is a greater exodus that's coming, and it was very interesting because his vision was about these invading armies and coming into the United States. And yes, invading armies, a lot of times we felt ourselves as protected because we've got oceans on either side. Well, in the modern day, the oceans are not a protection anymore. And recently, Dave Hodges from the Common Sense Show talked about a sevenfold pincher attack. Pincher, is that what it is? Attack onto the United States, and coming from several different areas, and involving Russia, China, South American countries, and coming in from different angles and different to take over this nation. Why? Because this nation owes trillions of dollars to these countries. And then also this United States, by placing sanctions on Russia, sanctions on these other nations, trying to squeeze them out of the market, it's strangling them. So what other resort do they have except to push back and to fight? And then look what our media is doing. Our media has made the Russia into this big boogeyman, and it's all fake. It's a false narrative, and yet the American people are like more anti-Russian today than they were 2 years ago or 4 years ago. And Russia is an independent economy, and many of them there's been a revival since the old Soviet Union, and many are believers over there. And yet our media has made them out to be this big boogeyman, and so many people have these emotional feelings against Russia that I think are unfounded, in my opinion. So we are standing on the precipice of an invasion. So here's Henry Groover's vision. His vision was that he saw these invading armies, and yet he saw these encampments of believers.
But he didn't know what that was.
He didn't know what those were, but there were these encampments of believers, and they were praying. They were on their faces. And as these invading armies came through, and where the encampment was, the invading armies just split and they went around the encampments as they prayed, is as if they didn't even know they were there. And like there was this bubble, this shell, this protective shield around them. The armies divided, went around them, and they continued on their way. And not one person was hurt, harmed, and not one loss of life that were in these preserved encampments. And so we need to understand that there is a time that we are not the nation that we once were. We are the nation that the whole world has come to hate. And because look, listen to the rhetoric that Macron gave when he over the weekend, how he's naming the United States as an enemy, how we have those coming out of the South America saying, they're carrying their flags in their migrant caravans saying they want to come to the United States, but they're
burning the United States flag,
they
carrying their own, and then wanting to come.
And they want to come and take advantage of the United States. It is an invasion. That's what President Trump had called it.
And President Trump is correct. And he's completely correct.
He is correct on that. It is an invading force. It is to take our focus off, and so that we end up spending billions of dollars on these people that are coming in that ultimately they have nothing. Then they've got to be fed. They've got to be taken care of one way or another until they can figure out what to do with them. So you have to put them up, and you've got to pay the price. And that's a big burden on our culture, considering that the cost of the value of the dollar is just not that strong. We think that wow, it looks like the dollar's strong. We got this and that and the other, but everything is very fragile. The U.S. dollar is fragile. The euro is fragile. Other currencies of the world are very fragile. It's all being propped up, and it's just waiting for something to blow up before it all begins to crumble.
But doesn't that play a part too? Because we've got the Federal Reserve, which is bad in and of itself too.
Yes.
What about specifically, you talked about Henry Gruver's vision of the 7-pronged attack, and it really sort of goes along with Dimitri Duduman's visions as well. What are the specific areas where they plan on attacking?
Okay.
The vision.
So that was an article that Dave Hodges wrote about the 7-prong attack, but Dimitri Duduman had the vision where because America would not repent and would not repent of her corruptions, so he said that there would be an attack upon America, and what would be happen is that there would be a civil war, and that the government of the United States would be focused so inwardly with all the internal problems that's when the attack from the outside would come in and attack. And he said America would be on fire. He said California would be on fire. Las Vegas would be on fire. He said he named several cities, New York City on fire. Several cities around the nation would be on fire. And we know right now California is on fire. I mean, part of that vision is really being seen. He said then that when we're being troubled with the rebellion that would be started by the communists within our nation, and the government would be focused inwardly on taking care of those problems started by the communists, then that's when the attack would come. And there would be several South American countries, including Venezuela, and he named several others, that they would come in and they would attack our nation along with Russia, and where there would be an attack on our cities, and where our cities would be
but what
destroyed.
Where were the attacks coming from?
There was about 10 different cities that would be attacked, and they would
because you had told me about coming over the Bering Strait and where.
Okay, so not mixing things together, but in Dave Hodges' article, which supports Henry Gruver's vision, is that Russia actually, I have not confirmed this, but apparently Russia has dug a tunnel that runs from Russia across over to Alaska. And remember what happened during the term of President Obama is that he shut down several military bases in Alaska, leaving Alaska vulnerable. Also,
he did it on purpose because he's in on it.
He also gave several islands that were in the that are part of Alaska, and gave those away to Russia.
How can you give part of the United States to someone else?
Well, and those were part of the original purchase that Seward, Secretary of State Seward.
How can you do it?
When he bought Alaska from Russia.
How can you do that?
Well, he actually has no authority to do it, but he did it.
So it's still ours. No, if it's not legal, then it's still ours.
Yeah, these are things that are way above our ability to say anything about. Unfortunately, I mean that's just the way it is. But the key is that Russia, one of their plans is to move in across, and they'll roll over Alaska. And then recently, Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada gave China the the codes to be able to monitor the submarine bases off of Washington, and by watching the coming and going of the submarines coming in and out of the submarine base there in Washington from Vancouver,
Why would Trudeau do that?
because Trudeau.
We have a lot of Canadians
We
watching.
do have a lot of Canadians, but he's betraying America because he is part of the globalist agenda to bring down America. Then so the Russian forces are going to come down out of Alaska. They're going to come down the West Coast. They're monitoring the submarine traffic coming out of Washington. The Chinese are watching that. Plus, the Chinese from the port at Long Beach in California, where they control that port, they also control several other ports on the West Coast, where they also have several of these multiple solar farms out there in the western part of the United States, where they actually have Chinese military that are running those, acting as civilian contractors. They also have control over ports from Panama and from the canal in Panama, as well as in Mexico and Central America, where they have made deals and inroads where they have the ability to have all their people already staged and in place to be able to come up through Mexico into the southern border. Plus, with the help of Venezuela, which is help funding these migrant caravan that's coming out of the south. So there's another prong. There's another prong where Russia's just made a deal with Cuba to set up a base in Cuba where there could be an amphibious landing under the southeast coast. And then we also know that under the Obama administration, they shut off the southern watch for where we are blind on our southern borders coming out of the Gulf of Mexico, that we don't have eyes for any type of attack coming out of the south, coming out of the Gulf of Mexico. We also, part of the prong attack is that out of the Arctic, Russia will come down through Canada into and split America from Minnesota, coming down with another pronged attack. And then they also believe that another possibility is, during all of this, an EMP attack on the Northeast, which would basically shut down the highest population areas of America.
And Washington.
Yeah, in Washington, D.C. So we have all these potentials. I mean, now Dave Hodges in his report, you can go read it for yourself. He makes a very well laid out plan of how this could happen. And I'm just saying these are, but when you line it up with the vision of Dimitri Duduman, with things that Henry Groover said when he's talked about some of his visions on the attacks on the cell towers to really take out all of the communication systems in America where we can't talk to each other. All of these things make a lot of sense about how these
not
attacks could
everybody's
take
heard
place.
that, so you can always just refresh a little bit on that.
He had one vision where he was praying and he saw all of these towers that were popping up all over America.
Mm-hmm. Especially right now, they're putting up the 5G. The 5G.
Yeah. So all these towers popping around America, and he thought they were radio towers. But now, and this is back in the 80s when he first saw it. Now, looking back on it, he says these were cell towers, because these cell towers are our communication systems that we talk to each other across America, bouncing off the towers and that type of thing. So he saw all of these towers all of a sudden, like there was this burst, and they all began to crumble and become dust and fall into the ground. And where our communications from cellular were knocked out. And so now he looks at, since technology has advanced, that's probably what those towers were. We really need to be prepared, and I know a lot of times we talk about this, about being prepared with water and with food and that type of thing. But another thing that we don't talk a lot about is, what about communication? How do we communicate with one another? And if the cell towers do go down and there's limited ability, how do you do that? Well, some are promoting being able to have maybe satellite phones, but also ham radio licenses and ham radios.
But you have to be licensed,
right? Whereas because ham radios, you can talk to somebody around the world because it bounces off the stratosphere and bounces off the various towers. You can actually talk to people all around the world with a ham radio, and you can get these regular just handsets like walkie-talkies. Regular walkie-talkies you get at Walmart, they might say they have a 12-mile distance, but that's only line of sight, and so they're probably as good as maybe a mile to less than a mile because of line of sight issues. So those are some things that communication is really a big deal with some of the events that are taking place. We need to make sure
So
that we
how can
can.
the common guy prepare?
The common guy needs to look at his finances. First off, you need to be looking at your food and your water. And if you don't have a water source, you need to have at least water filters, so where you can actually, whatever water you can get, you can filter it. And because boiling water may not be an option, but if you have a good water filtration system, then that's something that's number one. Without water, you die in 3 days. That's it. Period. If without food, you're going to die in an extended period of time. But you also need to be considering medication. If you are on some type of medication, if you end up going cold turkey because there's a supply interruption going to the pharmacies
We
and
need
you can't,
healed. We
and you,
need healing.
that's right, you can't get your medication, then you need to have some type of supply. But that's the other side. Now let's bring about some good news, and that is the power of God and the supernatural. Because when God's people need to be touched, when God is a God of mercy, He is full of loving kindness and compassion, and we need to understand that He loves us, and He loves us greatly. And now, some of us that have come out of that. Um, an understanding and praying for the sick and seeing people healed, we understand this more. Some people come out of traditions where they pray for the sick, but they just say, basically, they pray, let it be God's will, and they walk away and they hope for the best. No, we need to learn how to pray. We need to learn how to pray and pray until we see results, because we're going to be living in the time that we need to see. If for people to live and people to survive, then we need to be able to pray people whole. And because with some people without medication, it is not a matter of months, it's a matter of days. And so it's very important that we pray and understand that we are a people that will walk supernaturally, and that God heals, and He does it not over an extended period of time. He does that, but we need to understand that God heals in the suddenlies and in the immediates, and that when we pray, we need to expect to see that type of healing. We've seen bones that were broken healed.
We've seen
And,
gold teeth come into mouths.
I
We've
mean,
seen people wake up from comas when we've prayed.
that's right. We've seen some other things that are kind of funny too when we prayed, because we prayed and we believed and God moved and He did some things. But we need to understand that this is we are to be a people that are supernatural, because God is a supernatural God.
And we need to be the place. We should be the aliens and the strangers. And yes, we're going to be hated by some, but by many. But also, if we are walking out our faith as we are supposed to, walking in spirit and truth, then and walking in the fullness of the Spirit of everything He's given us, if we've practiced, if we've made it part of our lifestyle, then people are going to be turning to us for the answers, because they're going to need food. They're going to need healing, and the world can't give it to them. And we are primed and ready to give that out, unless we ignore that, unless we leave that for somebody else. But that's not ever supposed to have been somebody else's job. That's our job as believers.
Yes, yes. And I've thought about this so many different times, that we're going to find ourselves in places that we didn't expect to be in, but all of a sudden it's an emergency type of situation and people need help. Are we ready? And it's great to have people around that are medically trained, that know first aid, that's important and that saves lives. But what about being ready and prepared to pray? And let me say this: how about to raise the dead? Because are we ready to raise the dead? What if it's a family member? I had a vision this one time, and I was like, I don't know if this is what this really means, but it was. I was out at the mall. There was a big bomb, and from a terrorist attack, some type of attack. It was a bombing. There were people, dead bodies all around. There were craters. The emergency people were overwhelmed, and I'm like, there's nothing I can do. I need to get out of here. And in that dream or in that vision, the Father said, "No, you do something." And I'm like, what am I going to do? He said, "You raise them." And I was like, well, because in my mind, I said, somebody needs to help these people. Somebody needs to help these people. And so the Father got a hold of me and said, "No, you need to take care of business." And so I said, "Okay." And I took a deep breath, and and I saw myself going over and commanding those people to arise, to live and not die. And so that just kind of really took me back. I still remember it to this day as just as clearly as the day that I saw it. And that's the type of people we need to live in expectation. Are we ready when confronted with emergency situations?
But shouldn't we already be living that way?
We should be. We should be.
A lot of times why is it we hear of reports like from Henry Groover and others that are in the Christian church, and yet you don't hear a lot about that in the Hebrew Roots Messianic movement. It's out there, but that should be, well, how much more should we be doing that if we've got the Torah and Yeshua and the Spirit?
Yeah, that's right. Tova says here in the chat room, she says, through the power of Yah, I raised Ken in November 2015. See, I mean, there was a need. That was her husband. And
the love of her life.
The love of her life. And, no, it wasn't his time. And the power of God was released by her faith, and he was raised. So, I mean, we have to be ready. And that's in season and out of season.
Isn't that why shouldn't we be taking care of that now on the smaller scale? Because soon it's going to be on a much larger scale.
Yes, it is.
I think I was telling Jonathan this week. I said, be faithful in the small things while you're there, because the ministry that you have is so much greater, and you're faithful there, and you're learning, you're learning, you're giving out of yourself, because what's to come is much greater. You're in the prepping grounds right now. And
that's right. And we all need to look at it that way. Say, well, I'm so busy in my job, or life has got me so busy. I got so many things with the family and that type of thing. Guess what? It's all preparation. It's all preparation. When your child gets sick, that's preparation. Are you running that child to the doctor, or are you spending some time praying over that child? I mean, when things are happening in our lives, do we just let it go by? And I'm guilty of that, letting things go by. And we need to go back and reevaluate. We need to challenge ourselves.
The priorities. Prayer should be a priority.
Yes.
That's the bottom line, especially with the days that are ahead. We're not giving you these reports of for everybody to panic. We want you to know, because you're not going to hear it on the news.
Well,
you're not going to hear it from most of your sources, and we still need to be informed, so we know how to pray. So we know how to prepare, and so that's why we bring you news reports sometimes.
See, that's why I like listening to some of these testimonies that Henry Groover has given, and you can go back, you can go on YouTube, you can go back and listen to some of these testimonies that he's had. And one testimony that I heard recently was about, and it was threefold, and I share this on Shabbat, and because it was three different things, three different times that he did something that was really amazing to me. And one is that he had been called on a trip down to Southeast Asia, and
he was still very, very sick.
And he was not the Southeast Asia trip.
It wasn't that one.
No. And he was going to minister first in the northern part of the country, and then he was going to go to the southern part of the country, and he was going to minister. And when he got there, he ministered, and they said, okay, but we've canceled your trip to the south. And he said, why? Why'd you do that? And he said, it's because he said, these mosquitoes are carrying the plague, and people are dying in 4 days. We don't want you to die. And he said, well, I need to go. We make those arrangements again. And we're going to go down there and pray. And so they made the arrangements, and and he went, and there was a group of them, and they were all standing out in a field to pray. And the people that were with him, he said they were just soaked in mosquito repellent, because they didn't want to get bit. They didn't want to die. And so as they were praying, he had a vision of a dragonfly, and he remembered and then these words from what his father said. He said, never kill a dragonfly, because dragonflies eat mosquitoes. And he saw a dragonfly, And then as they were praying, then someone said, "Hey, look over there." And there was this big, massive cloud,
Dark.
a dark cloud of dragonflies all flying in to the region. And that was the answer to prayer, to wipe out this plague that was being carried by the mosquitoes. What an amazing thing, because they went down there to believe God. It didn't matter what the circumstances were, but by faith they were protected. By faith, they were able to make a difference when they prayed.
We need to have that kind of faith.
Exactly.
We need to remember what it was that we were given at the garden. We were to take dominion here.
Yes.
And we need to remember that, and we need to start living that out.
And
we every time we need to go to every time we gather together, every time there's a need, whatever it may be, we have got to start acting out of expectation of seeing the supernatural.
Yes. Yes. Another time was that there was an island off of Japan. It's one of the Japanese islands. There's like thousands of these islands. And this island was, I don't remember exactly what he called it, but he said that they were so full of these venomous snakes, very venomous snakes, that if you got bit, you died. And he said, well, we've been given authority over the serpents and the scorpions. And so he went and he said, well, we're going to go there and we're going to take authority over those snakes. And he said, no, if you go there, you're going to die. He said, no, that's why we're going to go. We're going to go to take authority back over this island. And so he went and he stepped off on the island and he prayed. And there, and the snakes, I don't know exactly what happened, but he said the snakes are no longer on the island. And they're gone. They're completely gone. Whether they died or they disappeared or God just, removed them, they're gone and they're not there. And it's a safe island to this day since he prayed. Now, another time was when he went to Fukushima after the meltdown of Fukushima, as they were praying over that area. Because remember, Henry Groover is a prayer walker. He'd walk up and down the streets of cities all over the world, up and down streets and every city block in some cities, and praying over those cities. And he took a group to pray over that area where Fukushima is, where the meltdown is, and it's still dangerous because it's still melting down. And they had a Geiger counter and they were watching the radiation levels and they were praying over the area. And one of the people said, hey, Brother Groover, the Geiger counter, the radiation is going up. It's spiking, and it was going up beyond the safe level, up to 10, 11, 12, 14. And he said, we've got to go now. We've got to go now. It's not safe because the radiation. He said, no, this is why we're here, to stop and pray. And so what did he do? He began to rebuke the radiation, and they watched as he prayed, and as they rebuked the radiation, that Geiger counter went all the way back down to the safe level again, and whatever that is on the radiation scale. And because he prayed. And are we in that place? Are we willing to get to that place? Or what will it take?
Are we willing to be hungry enough to have that, to live a life like that, that we will get into his presence and we will get so close to him, not just talk about him, but be with him, that is literally how we live.
Yeah. And I'll say this, sometimes Yahweh has to bring us through difficult circumstances to get us to that place. And I pray that we can get there before having to go through those difficult times and those difficult circumstances. For Henry Groover, he faced death on several times. One occasion, he died 30 minutes dead, and his daughter, by faith, commanded him to come back into his body.
She said, the stripes of Jesus have already paid the price. Yeah. So.
And he came back into his body, and he was raised after 30 minutes of confirmed death. And he's still alive today. He was almost dead with cancer. They prayed for him.
That's recent.
And that was recent. And he
Stage 5.
Stage 5, that means the cancer was throughout his body. He hurt when you touched him because of the cancer throughout his body. But they prayed, they gathered around him and prayed, and he was completely healed instantly. And why? Because not one drop of blood of Yeshua was wasted. It was for our life.
He believes it and he lives it.
That's right. By the stripes of Yeshua, we are healed. That's what the word says. So why should anything else take our life?
Well, we didn't get to the teaching.
No, we didn't.
My notes are ready. I think it's too late now.
Yeah, it's about that time, isn't it?
It is that time.
Well, we're really thankful that you joined us, and I hope some of you are inspired, and that from listening to these testimonies, you can go back and listen. We're hashing some things out that somebody else has talked about, maybe thinking about some things that are happening in the world today where we need to be prepared about. Maybe something that we talked about tonight will inspire you to press in that intimate relationship with Yeshua more than any other time in our lives. So with that said, we want you to partner with us at Life of Worship. We have a website where you can find out more about Life of Worship. We are a ministry and a congregation here in Amarillo, Texas. So if you're ever passing through, we would love for you to join us on Shabbat, and where you can join us at 2 o'clock for our Torah study and 5 o'clock for our worship service. And you can look us up at www.lifeofworshipamarillo.org. You can look at us that way. Drop us a line at our email, which is on our website. You can just look that up as well, LOW at lifeofworshipamarillo.org. And if you'd like to be a sponsor and partner with us, you can go to our website, and there's a place where you can give an offering or a love gift. So we would appreciate that as well. But with all that said, we also would just like to get to know you.
That's right.
So, well, this has been Walking in Spirit and Truth. I hope you're inspired. I hope you've been challenged, and we sure appreciate you being with us today. So on behalf of the show and for Lamb Tube, this is John Craig.
And this is Sandi.
And until next time, shalom.